I want to respond to this video by Chthonios. And it says the Bible, self-ponage. Basically, he runs through these points. He says, you know, if you believe in some kind of strange God beyond this universe that can't be, you know, proven or disproven, but he says if that God did come down to this universe at some point, like with Jesus' incarnation, that would leave evidence. One of those pieces of evidence would possibly be a document, you know, documenting what that God did. And then, of course, the Bible would be such a document. And then he said that the Bible is self-refuting. Now, so let's just look at these self-refutations that he raised. In Genesis, we got the sun after plants. This is not really a self-refutation. This is not the Bible disagreeing with itself. This is the Bible disagreeing with other authorities like basic scientific knowledge and what we know to be true about our universe, but it's not the Bible disagreeing with itself. It's not a self-refutation. And also, I would say there's a bit of a factual error here, because, well, it's not a bit of a factual error. The thing about this book is it's easy to misunderstand because it was written a very long time ago to people with very different questions than ours, and it answers, you know, questions that we're not asking. And so we look at it and say, well, it's here to answer questions that we ask, and it doesn't, and we see it it's confused us. So basically, when we look at this book, we think, well, this is the story of how God made everything. But actually, that's not what it is at all. It's a story and written with the express purpose to say you shouldn't worship the gods of other nations. When you say, well, where are other gods mentioned? I don't see, you know, any mention of other gods. Well, that's because you don't know the names of the other gods. And even if you did, you would have to, you know Hebrew, and you read this in the original language it was really written in. And so, of course, I could see how it would be easy to misunderstand. So when it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness of the face of the deep, he uses a Hebrew word that sounds like the chaos God. You know, and when he says, let there be light, he's the light God that people worshipped. Plant God, sun God, you know, animal gods. What this thing does is it goes right down the list of these gods, and says this thing that you worship, it was next that God made that. Okay, and then with the sun and the moon, the thing is, or take for example, you know, the first life forms. They didn't worship the first life forms, so there's no mention of the first life forms here. Completely leaves that out because there was not worshipped as a god. Or you scroll down where it says, "Let the waters swarm with living creatures." That literally is a word for the mighty creatures of the sea. The ones with living creatures means the ones with the breath of life in them, mammalian, whales, the ones that were worshipped as gods. That's when whales were made, not when, you know, so he's going to skip to the next thing they worshipped. So they worshipped the light on the earth from their perspective. And it would be, you know, the earth was a chaotic mass. Then light could come in. Then we have a water cycle. Then we have plants. And then plants would change the atmosphere enough for you to see the sun and moon, which is what they worshipped. Their, you know, this ancient people's viewpoint of the sun and moon. So that's why you have the sun after plants there. It's easily, I mean, part of the problem is, you know, people don't know anything about science and scientific method or the purpose of science, and they don't understand anything about the basic rules of interpreting ancient text, you know, hermeneutics and exegesis and things like that. Alright, and then we go to the next one. It says, you know, God gives differing commandments: do not murder, but then he gives laws to stone people to death over things that he says are little things. Again, this is not really a... I don't see how this is necessarily a contradiction, unless you want to say that either you command people not to murder or you command execution, but nary the twain shall meet. That's not the way we use it in America. I mean, in America we have, murder and then execution, or war, and various reasons someone might be put to death, but murder would be putting someone to death outside the limits of the law. Now, if you have a problem with that particular law or why they were stoning people to death, then that would not be a contradiction. That would be a moral, you would be bringing down morality against those laws, saying those laws are immoral or wrong. But again, it's not a contradiction, because murder is when you kill someone outside the confines of the law. If you want to talk about whether or not that law is immoral, we can leave that up to any follow-up discussion anybody wants to do. Then the final one, the Bible says that all God's plans come to pass, but then God fails in his own assassination attempt against Moses. I think the passage he was talking about was Exodus 4:26-28. And there's just some missing facts. In other words, you can read the passage. It says, they're on the way to Egypt, Moses and his family, and it says, at a lodging place on the way, the Lord met him and sought to put him to death, which would be Moses. Okay, then Zipporah, which was Moses' wife, took a flint, or sharp rock, and cut off her son's foreskin. Okay, she circumcised her son, and then the piece she cut off, she touched Moses' feet with it and said, surely you are a bridegroom of blood to me. So he left him alone. In other words, God left Moses alone. It was then that she said, a bridegroom of blood, because of the circumcision. And those first words, verse 26. So he left him alone. This is not a failure. This is an intentional, giving up, quitting what you were starting to do. It's not a failure. In other words, it says, if I go and try to do something, and then I say, you know what, I better not do that, then that's not a failure. In my attempt to do something, I'm just not attempting to do it. When it says, so I mean, the best you could argue here is that, God's not all powerful, because he sought, and it didn't happen. But again, even then, when it says he sought to put him to death, it's already assumed in there that he hasn't put him to death yet, but he just has led in that direction. And apparently he got them to do what he wanted them to do. What can I say? So there we have it. Thanks. Bye.